Okay, this little video is going to be about how to write an essay. It's straightforward, it's simple. Actually writing an essay, you're going to find it really easy. But nobody tells you this. Well, some people tell you this, but try this particular method. So it's about writing an essay, but it can be used if you want to complete any kind of project that involves words. So maybe you need to write a cover letter for a resume, or maybe the place you work, they're going to close your department and you have to, or you want to stay where you are, but you need to convince somebody that there are good reasons for keeping your department going and closing somewhere else. So you need to present a good argument, right, to prove your position, to prove your case. Or maybe you've got a problem with somebody and you're not quite sure how to deal with them, or how to get them to change their behavior, for instance. So if you use this particular method, it's going to mean that when you have the meeting with the person, you're going to be more convincing, and you've got a better chance of having them change their behavior in such a way that it suits you, right? So it's about an essay, but it's about lots of other things as well. Okay, with an essay, first thing you need to know is how many words you've got, because we're going to divide up the essay into sections, and we need to know how many words belong in each section, right? So if you think about it, how much can you say, or what can you say in 1,200 words? And the answer basically is nothing. Obviously, you can say a few things, but I'm saying nothing because we often go into writing an essay thinking we've got to say everything, right? And if you think you have to say everything, you get stuck, you get paralyzed right in the very beginning, and it makes writing the essay that much more difficult. But if you know how many words you've got, and you don't try and say too much, but you select the kind of things you're going to say, and you say them well, and you prove them and you back them up, then you end up with a strong piece of writing that the reader enjoys, and so you get a better mark. But it begins with understand that you can't say everything, so pick and choose carefully what you're going to say to make for a strong essay, right? So let's say we have 1,200 words. We're going to have an introduction. There's going to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning, let's say we have 1,200 words. The beginning, 200 words for the introduction, 200 words for the conclusion or the ending. That leaves you 800 for the middle bit. And let's say we're going to make 3 points. Point number 1 is the most important. People remember the beginning and the end. So make the first argument or the first point your strongest, right? So let's say we give it 300 words. And that leaves 500 words. So we get 2 more points, give them 250 words each. That's like a one sheet of paper, a handwritten sheet of paper, is about 250 words. So instead of it being a big essay, now it's into 5 manageable little chunks. Do 1 a day, you've done it in 5 days with no real effort. Well, don't mean no real effort, but it's an awful lot easier than you would think it would be. So we have 5 sections. And I was trying to think of something to illustrate 250 words. And I was trying to think of a song, lyrics for a song. And one that I happen to like is Empire State of Mind with Jay-Z and Alicia Keys. So if you listen to that song, I timed it, watched it on YouTube, and I timed it. And the first verse and the first chorus, listen to that, and it's 227 words, right? It takes 1 minute and 12 seconds to listen to 220 words. So that'll give you an idea of actually how little really is involved in writing an essay, because you've got 5 lots of 220 words. That's 1,100 words. So it's manageable. And I need to tell, okay, I'm going to say that, think of an essay as being like telling a joke. So I'm going to tell you a joke. This fellow goes to, Frank Sinatra was this big name singer, Las Vegas, totally popular once upon a time. But he used to sing in nightclubs, and so before this concert would begin, he would walk through the crowd, sitting at tables, and go onto the stage. So this fellow he's on his first date with this woman, and he wants to impress her. So he goes to the dressing room and he says, "Look, Frank, I'm a big fan. On your way to the stage, when you're walking through the tables, think you could say hello, and she'll think I know you, and I'll have a better time, and she'll be impressed, and I'm a big fan." And Frank says, "Okay, for a fan, I'll do anything." So later, Frank's walking through the crowd and he says, "Hey, George, how are you doing over there?" And George says, "Get lost, Frank. Can't you see I'm with my girlfriend?" So that's the joke. Possibly not the funniest joke of all time, but the reason for that joke is there's a punchline. And think of the conclusion in the essay as like a punchline to a joke. So when I was telling you the joke, I didn't tell you it was a Saturday night, because you don't need to know that. I didn't tell you the fellow's name was, or the woman's name was Mary, and she was wearing a blue dress, and the fellow had a whiskey sour at the table to drink, I didn't tell you any of that stuff because none of it was important or relevant for the punchline of the joke. Think of your essay that way. When you talk about in the beginning and in the middle, when you think about what you're going to say and how you're going to prove your point or defend your argument, remember there's a punchline, there's a conclusion. So only include stuff that makes sense for that particular essay at that moment. The thing is, you may have some brilliant point that you really want to include, but the problem is it may be a brilliant point, but it doesn't relate to the essay that you're writing. So you have to have the courage to not include that important, that interesting piece of information because it doesn't back up your argument. It doesn't do anything for the essay, right? So you need to, second point is you need to edit and read and reread your essay and make sure that what you're saying is strong and relevant and important for that particular essay, right? That you're making a point and you're proving it or you're backing it up. And every sentence has got a reason for being in there. And if you're willing to be hard on yourself and your writing and only include stuff that's important or that makes sense or that backs up the argument that you're making or that leads to the conclusion, keep that sentence. If the sentence doesn't take you in the direction of the conclusion of the punchline, either change it so that it does or get rid of it. And you'll end up with a stronger essay that the person reading it enjoys and gives you a better mark. So, this next point is, where do you begin? And people tend to begin at the beginning, but when you're writing an essay, you don't. You begin at the end. First thing you do is you write the conclusion, right? Because when you know the conclusion, when you know the punchline, you know what to include so that the reader is going to get the point or is going to agree with the conclusion that you're making. So you write the conclusion first, so you know what to include leading up to the conclusion. Then you write point 3, which is the weakest of the 3 arguments that you're going to make. And you've got 250 words, so you explain what point 3 is, and then you explain something about it, or to prove your point, or maybe you talk about somebody else said this, or somebody else who's an idiot said this, therefore the opposite's probably true. Then you write point 2, the second strongest of the arguments that you want to make. And it's the same situation. You explain what point 2 is, you talk about it, you bring in arguments or ammunition to prove your point or to prove that the position that you're taking is correct and worthwhile and valid and meaningful and important, things like that. Then you write point 1, which is the most important argument that you can make. And the thing is, what's the most important argument? That's where you come in, because you need to think about it and make a choice and make a decision about what you're going to say. And you need to choose. And that means you need to... An essay a good essay isn't so much about good writing. It's more that it proves that you can think, right? You're not just writing a grocery list in any old order. You're taking an argument or a position and you're explaining it in its logical form, and you're sort of taking certain aspects or certain sides of the argument and examining them and proving them and bringing in information that backs up what you're saying. That's what makes an essay. So, then after you've done point one, then you write the introduction. And the thing is, by this point, because you're writing the introduction, because you know the conclusion and the end and the different points that you're going to make, it's more easy, it's more possible to write a good introduction because you know what you're going to be talking about. Because if you do it the other way around, you start off with what you think is a good introduction. And then later you can discover that it sounds good in the introduction, but you haven't got much to back it up with. But if you start at the end and work backwards, you know what you've already said. So you can introduce it by saying, I'm going to tell you about such and such. I'm going to prove to you that such and such is the case, and that we're going to refer to this and this and this as evidence to prove our position, to prove our case. So that's what you do. You figure out what you could say, and then make decisions about what you will actually talk about. And then it's best if you can be willing to edit. And that means you write it, then you read it, and you say to yourself, is this a good point? Is there a better way I can back it up? Is it convincing? And you sort of make yourself work at it and make changes and make improvements. And if you do that 2 or 3 times, and we're not dealing with a lot of words, like one section at a time, 250, 300 words. If you're willing to do that, you'll end up with a much better and stronger essay. So that's my presentation on how to write an essay. I'm going to do something else about how to actually organize the structure of each paragraph or each section. That'll be a separate video coming up quite soon. And I think it's going to be called Creativity and Analysis, because that's the 2 steps that you go through. So look for something on creativity and analysis coming up soon. So that's it. Thank you very much. If you have comments, leave a comment and we'll take it from there. Okay, bye-bye.